I'm Larry Wagner. You're listening to the Leave the Key Real Estate Show. I'm here with Harold Bollaci, and we're here talking about real estate and the legal component to it, dealing with probate and inheriting property and so on. And Harold, question for you. Right now we're going through this period of the COVID virus, which is affecting everything. How is that affecting the probate timetable and how people settle their estates and so on?
So the first thing it's done is, thankfully from my perspective, it's caused more people to want to do some planning, because we all have this idea now that today could be our last day on earth, so maybe we should get our affairs in order. But more importantly, we were talking in the prior segment about probate, which is the process by where a last will and testament is submitted to the surrogate's court for approval. And you can't sell an inherited property unless you go through probate or administration in the surrogate's court. So how has coronavirus affected this? Like many businesses, the courts are either closed or on dramatically reduced timetables and schedules. So what used to maybe take 2 or 3 months in Nassau County surrogates or Suffolk County is now taking 6 to 9 months. So,
but I don't understand about that is, I know we deal with a lot of permit issues, which is not probate, but it's dealing with the towns and the towns for the most part. And things that would take 3 days are now taking 3 months. Why are things taking 30 times longer? It doesn't make sense. And that's the part I'm saying. You may have a staff reduced by 10%, so things take 30 times longer, but you're experiencing the same thing in the probate case.
I wish I could explain it. Everyone's nervous. Everybody's scared. People are working from home. And leading into the coronavirus, at least in the surrogate's court, which from my perspective is a fairly archaic court, they didn't have the mechanisms set up for people to work from home.
Right.
Unlike most businesses, remote working is not part of how the government takes care of its business. So if people are told to stay home, they're at home.
Right. We didn't have the ability to work remote. We didn't think we had the ability to work remotely. As a matter of fact, my son lived in Boston. He said, if you want to work with me, which I wanted him to come down and work with me, you have to move to New York. He moved to New York. 2 years later, Corona hit, and none of us are going to the office. So it turned out he never had to leave Boston at all. But apparently the government hasn't learned that lesson.
They haven't. And in the government's defense, they probably have more procedures that they have to follow.
Yes.
There's more of an infrastructure issue. They can't just spend money without approvals like we can.
Yes.
And additionally, you have to remember that when I go to the surrogate's court and submit original documents, they're held in safekeeping at the court. So those aren't necessarily things that I want a court clerk taking home either by car or by subway and risking either damaging or losing those documents.
Correct.
So it's an obstacle, and I think the courts are putting a lot of effort into resolving those problems. But the key planning takeaway is you should not have any expectation of getting court approval quickly until we're long through this virus.
Right. So you're saying in normal times, how long do you say it normally takes to go through probate?
If your application is complete and you're not going to have any family disputes or difficulties obtaining jurisdiction, most New York courts, 2 to 3 months. I think that's fair.
Is that consistent to you? And I know the courts are county-based. You have the 5 counties of New York City as well as the 2 on Long Island. Are there better ones, or I'll say less better?
I would never say one court is better than the other because I have to practice in all those courts.
Faster? We use the word faster.
I've spent a great deal of my career in the Nassau County Surrogates Court.
Right.
They've always been very efficient. Suffolk County Surrogates Court is very efficient.
Right.
Even Kings and Queens counties are pretty efficient, but it also has to do with volume.
Right.
There's only so many man hours in a day, and they can only do so much, and they just don't have the employees to handle the volume of work that they're trying to handle.
Right. And with Corona, in all fairness to the Surrogates Court in particular, there were more deaths due to Corona. So with the death rate higher, there's not more staff in the courts, but there are more claims to process.
There's probably fewer staff and more claims to process. And remember, these are people working in government buildings, in a bullpen type environment. They don't have they had to be able to secure the office space, and a lot of them are in taller buildings. So now you have an issue of employees getting into the building. There were a lot of obstacles the courts had to remedy in order to be back up and running.
So are there any other bits of advice that you have?
Larry, the best thing people can do to protect their homes for themselves, for the long term, and also avoid the delays and costs associated with either probate or administration, is trust planning, either through a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust.
People always think the wealthy people write trusts. Again, as a financial advisor, I mentioned, I heard that all the time. I only have $800,000. I don't need a trust. I only have $200,000. Who is a trust for, and what are the benefits of a trust?
So I think it's a complete fallacy that trusts are only for rich people.
I agree.
But of course, I'm a trust and estates attorney, so I'm a little biased.
I'm not a trust and estates attorney, and I agree
and
with
you. Agree with me,
Yes.
but that doesn't happen very often
yes.
that people agree with me, so I appreciate that. Revocable trusts are terrific vehicles for probate avoidance.
Right.
Number one. So we've been talking about the delays associated with probate. Transfer your house into trust, and it passes relatively quickly upon your death. God forbid I put my house in trust and I die. My successor trustee can sign a deed to the house within 30 days. There really is no time limit
Right.
on how quickly a successor trustee can sell that house to a buyer. And the key there is the delays associated with settling an estate cost beneficiaries money because that asset needs to be maintained after the person died.
Right.
We all know what taxes cost on Long Island.
Yes.
Utilities, just basic lawn repairs.
Yep.
And that all adds up very quickly. And then if you're in Manhattan, you have co-op fees and late fees, and it becomes a real waste of money. So trust planning allows you to bypass that.
Yep.
And it saves a lot of money for the beneficiaries. And you've been talking about your company and how you buy quickly.
Right.
This allows people to sell out of a trust pretty quickly.
Right.
And get their money.
We mentioned earlier about a step up in basis, meaning that they sell the house at the higher valuation, the valuation at the date of death or 9 months later. Putting a house in a trust, does that change that, or they still maintain the
A
step up?
revocable trust maintains the step up in basis.
So they get the best of both worlds. They avoid the probate. They can sell the house quickly. They can sell it relatively hassle-free, and they still get to keep the step up in basis.
100%.
It sounds like a no-brainer. What is the downside to writing a trust? There's the cost of writing a trust.
Right. From my perspective, there's no downside. It's
Right.
the expense associated with creating the trust. So obviously there are the legal fees involved. In Nassau and Suffolk, in every county, you would have to record a deed transferring your property into trust.
Right.
So in Suffolk and Nassau, the recording charges are a little bit higher, but it's a one-time cost.
Right.
And the analogy I make all the time is anything you do relative to estate planning, it's really the best insurance policy you could ever buy.
That's very interesting. You're here on the Leave the Key Real Estate Radio Show, and my guest is Harold Bollaci, and we're talking about real estate and the legal issues surrounding real estate, mainly inheriting real estate and putting real estate into a trust and so on. And the last thing we're just saying is counties have tax issues, I guess recording fees.
Recording fees.
What does a trust typically cost to write? Is that an answerable question, or it's too complicated?
Lawyers hate to discuss fees, but of course I'll discuss it.
Yeah.
Anywhere from a simple trust,
Right.
$2,500 to $5,000.
Okay, and
is
it could
fair.
save them a hassle down the road.
It'll
That's what's
save
key.
them tenfold.
Save
down
them
the road.
tenfold. I'm going through it right now. I just lost my mom 2 years ago. My
know, I'm
dad.
sorry.
Thank you very much. And it's such a hassle. And we have not yet gotten our papers. I have not yet appointed executor, and that could be months from now.
And it's a hassle for a family that did planning
Yes.
and is relatively cohesive.
Yep.
Trusts are really important for people who own properties in multiple states
Yes.
because obviously you'd want to avoid probate in 2 states.
My father did. My father did.
And also they're really important when you have blended families.
Yep, absolutely.
You have second marriage, you have children from both sides. They get along now, but just you wait.
That's right. Just you wait. It's amazing how money makes a difference.
Right. And the trust really prevents the argument.
It does. It does. Again, you've been listening to the Leave the Key Real Estate Show, again, with Harold Bollaci. And if you have issues dealing with real estate or estates, please reach out to him. First of all, by the way, Harold, how do people reach you?
Well, they can reach me through my website, bollacilaw.com, or of course they could call me at 516-538-9700.